What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Big Five Pod, episode number 111. Yes, yes, we're trip. I know we've been in triple digits, but now we're the same digit, and that's just satisfying to me. I don't know. I'm, of course, co-host Kyle Morello. Next to me in the practice union jersey from a few years back, that was a giveaway. Before I even started working there, Jake Copestick. Cope, how we doing?
Very well, Kyle. Well, let me move my mic closer to me here.
That would help a little bit, yeah.
And big win down in Florida.
Yes, sir.
Weather wasn't probably as good as you thought it was going to be. I talked to you was it Friday, and you were like, it's kind of chilly down there.
Yeah, yeah.
The Union were not chilly, Kyle. Union were on fire.
Oh,
Big
yeah.
win, 1-0. They keep playing like that, Kyle. Not going to lose another game.
Well, yeah, they're on pace to go 34
Oh,
now.
never lose.
34 0 0.
There you go.
So, no, Cope, it was good. It was a little chilly down in Florida, like you mentioned in Orlando. It was the so we flew in Friday and spent Friday night there, and it was like 47, which for Orlando in late February, it's a little chilly at night. But for the game, it was good. It was like mid to high 60s. Got down to probably around high 50s by the time the game ended, but it was good. It was comfortable. And more importantly, it was a good win. It was a really good win to start off the season. And the new Voltage kit, which if you hadn't had a chance to go look at it or go get it, might as well do so. Much different than the floral one that Cope is currently wearing, but a good one nonetheless. But yeah, it was good. It was a good win. Good to get back on the road with the Radio Boys, Dave Leno, Shannon Williams. And this week we're back at home on Saturday for the home opener against FC Cincinnati. So come on down if you are thinking about it, haven't been to a game. Cope, I know it's been a couple years for you, so gonna have to get you down to the Sub at some point. But yeah, good stuff all around. So yeah, a
Not to
lot of good
mention,
stuff. Oh,
not to
go ahead.
mention,
Go
not to
ahead.
cut you off, not to mention, Kyle, next time we record an episode, it will be March. We're going to
Yes.
be, let's give a plug to our live spaces show now. Me, Kyle, Aaron Bracey, for the second time and the third time on the road doing a live show, our Big Five Spaces show we do with Aaron Bracey. We will be back on the road this Sunday. We'll be at South House. Time, I think, is TBD. I think we might try to move it up from 8 o'clock. We'll push it out on socials as soon as possible.
Yep.
But we will be back on the road. We'll be back at South House. They got beer. They got great food. Good place to watch a game. We'll be breaking down the Big Five and the week that was, Kyle, in the month of March.
That's
We're right
right.
there.
That's right. And Cope, we also have something returning in the month of March, which I guess we should probably tell the people about since it's only coming up here in a few weeks, right?
Might as well break it. I'll let
Might
you
as
do
well.
it. It's been your thing the last 2 years. You've done a great job with it. I'm going to let you break it.
Brackets Eve is returning. And if you were here last year, you figured that that's probably where I was going with this. But Brackets Eve live show on YouTube with the Big Five Pod is returning. Guests still to be determined, so we'll have more information on that. We will make an official post on this because I'm sure this might get buried a little bit for people who maybe only have a little bit, couple minutes of attention span or a couple minutes time to listen to us. So might as well throw that in there too. We are returning with that. There will be more information to follow. But yes, Cope, I'm very excited about that. We're going to talk about the bracket when the bracket comes out right before the madness starts. I guess
Yes.
technically after the madness starts because there's the playing games, and those are always fun too. But before the field of 64 starts, we will be breaking it down. Cope,
Yes. And also, I mean, the bracket challenge will come back. We'll
of
still
course.
figure out some details with that, but our bracket challenge will be back again. So all good stuff. I mean, the best month of the year is coming up, Kyle. We're right there.
Yeah.
We are right
We
there.
are, listen, we're recording this on Monday, the 24th, so we are 5 days away. 5 days away from the month of March, Cope. So might as well fill the people in on the March happenings.
Yeah.
There will be more to follow on these things, of course. But first things first, yes, the live Spaces show with Aaron Bracey. I almost combined Spaces and Bracey there. At South House, Philly on Sunday night, time TBD, either 8 or earlier. So we'll let you know about that. But Cope, we got some basketball to get into. You can tell our spirits a little lifted this week if you're watching this at home and listening probably too. There was more good things to talk about this week in the Big Five. Maybe they heard our sorrows and use that as motivation. I don't know, but Cope, we got a lot to talk about. We're gonna go start with your quick hitters, of course. So if you got that ball on you, get that ball on you. If you don't, that's okay. He's looking for it. Cope, I'm gonna let the people know about your first thing anyway, though, because I want to throw it to you, and then I want to talk a little bit about it too before you move on to what's next. But of course, we cannot start this show besides our announcements without the mentioning of Fran Dunphy, Mr. Big Five himself, retiring at the end of the year from LaSalle and moving to a special advisor role. But he will be done coaching, which there's really no bigger announcement than that has happened this year, maybe in this podcast, just of who he is. So Cope, I'm gonna let you take it away. Then I'd like to say a few words after that. But Cope's quick hitters.
Yeah, only one, and then we can get into Fran Dunphy. I mean, he's certainly going to take up a portion of this episode. With us being the Big Five pod, how can we not talk at length here about Mr. Big Five? But only have one this week, Kyle, and it's an important one. Fran Dunphy retiring is not a quick hitter because we need to spend a
That's
lot of.
true. That's true.
But
Yes.
I have one, and we need to take a moment for the Philadelphia Catholic League. I went for the third year in a row. Yes, clap it up again. Always delivers. Great time. Literally one of my favorite days on the calendar, on the sports calendar, is going to the Palestra, my favorite place to see a game, because it's probably the only time during the year that I get to see my favorite arena packed like that.
Yeah.
Packed to the gills, standing room, place is absolutely jam-packed. Photographers, our guy Jared Phillips from Make a Difference was on the sideline taking pictures for both the men's and the women's game. There's photographers everywhere. It is awesome. The atmosphere is absolutely electric. And it really, Kyle, is astonishing, really, to see the Palestra completely packed, to see corners full, to see it as loud as it is. The student sections behind both baskets are awesome. They're so into it. And I showed up in the second half of the women's game, which also, again, went right down to the wire for the third year in a row, decided in the last minute. And legitimately, I got chills as the buzzer sounded and Newman Goretti, all the girls stormed the court when they had won. And I got chills not only looking at that, but I got chills even looking at how upset the Carroll players were, because we'll see so much of this in the next month, Kyle. That's the great part about college basketball, is that there's so much joy in victory, there's so much agony in defeat, and although it sucks to see people upset, you work so hard to get to the Palestra. That might be your only shot to get there and play in the PCL final. But it's what makes the sport so great with how closely contested it is. If you have been to the Catholic League the last 3+ years, like, and pretty much every time there, I know the semifinals where the games weren't as close, but to see the games played like that, like, legitimately, I had goosebumps and a smile on my face the entire time. And then the boys' game, Father Judge winning their first title. Kyle, we were not born yet.
No.
1998. Since 1998, Father Judge has not won the Philadelphia Catholic League. They did this year behind Kavere Kennedy, who's going to Merrimack. Great game. And against Roman, who was denying Roman the three-peat, the big dogs, was awesome. The Father Judge student section was so loud. I was sitting in behind the Judge bench. Shout out to Reagan Gallagher from Penn for hooking me up with some tickets. Me and my guy Ben Steenrod got really, really good seats, first row in the 200 level. But just a terrific event. The atmosphere, the games, seeing the nets cut down after, everything about it, Kyle, is why I love the game of basketball and why I love the sport. And even though it's not a college game, being there for a high school game in that atmosphere at the Palestra, like, every player, men and women in the Catholic League, yearns for that moment to get that opportunity to play there. And it is a terrific event, a must-see event. And I tell everybody, and I did this last year, and I pleaded, and I'll plead again, if you have not been there, you need to take care of it early, because it's really hard to get seats. And once the finals opened up, it was pretty much sold out the night of the semifinals. It was sold out in a handful of hours. So you got to take action quickly. You need to get yourself there. If you're just a sports fan, not even a basketball fan, for the spectacle, for the atmosphere, for the event, get yourself to the Philadelphia Catholic League Championships at the Palestra. I will be there again next year unless I'm sick and I literally can't get out of the bed. I won't be there. But a spectacular event every single year. It delivered once again. You need to get yourself there.
Yeah. and I wish I could have been there this year. Like I said last episode, it was my grandfather's 91st birthday party. So one of those things, Cope, one of those small few things that, yes, thank you. That I don't know why I'm saying thank you. Why I'm saying thank you, but anyway, one of those small few things that would prevent me from doing something like that. But if didn't have that, if it was a regular old Sunday for me, yeah, I would have been in those seats. The Plestra, I was there the last 2 years. Plestra's always rocking. It's a sight to see. And like you said, even if you're not a basketball fan, if you're a sports fan, get there. If you're in the area and you can get there, get there. It's worth it 100% of the time. All right, Cope. Now to the first things first on this podcast. Not so much quick hitter, but quick hitter, just because it's different than everything else we're going to talk about. But of course, Fran Dunphy retiring from coaching LaSalle, coaching basketball. He has been an institution in the city of Philadelphia in the Big Five since well before even his coaching days. Obviously, he was a player at LaSalle too, but since the 80s as a coach at Penn, and then the coach at Temple, and then the coach at LaSalle. And also taught at Temple too, which matters, of course, giving back. But he, and we talked about this on Spaces, but it was more than just the coaching for him. Obviously, we can go through the accolades and the over 600 wins, uh, the however many tournament appearances. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, Cope, but the tons of tournament appearances, whether that was with Penn, he made a ton with Temple as well. What was it, 11 and 18 years, I think, with Temple, something like that. And then obviously helping trying to restore the LaSalle basketball program and athletic program to maybe even a more general scale. But that all gets overshadowed by how good of a human being he was. And we didn't know him like that. Obviously, we've had some interactions with him with, covering games, with press conferences, our time at Temple. And I actually wanted to give an example real quick, even though it's a very small example, but it's the one, I think, thing that I can share of my experience with Fran Dunphy. So I was a producer for Al Sports Update. If you don't know what Al Sports Update is, it's Temple's student-run sports TV program. It's a club, it's a class, and it's run by Professor Matt Fine. Shout out to Matt Fine. But very, very important in my, helping me in my career right now because I was where I started being a TV producer. But anyway, it was one night, November 2019. He had retired from Temple. Aaron McKee took over, and he was being inducted into the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame at Rivers Casino. And last minute, I think someone might have either dropped out for covering it or they found out late that we could cover it. So Matt Fine texted our group chat and was like, hey, like, can anybody do this? Producers don't usually do that kind of thing, but I jumped on it. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, if we don't have anyone, like, I would love to. So I did. And me and one of our videographers went over there and was so excited to interview him. We had our credentials and everything. And he comes by. I do an interview with him. I'm not going to lie, Cope kind of killed it. And we went to go look back at the footage, and it was corrupt. For whatever reason, it just did not go on the camera. And I was, oh no, started sweating. I called Matt Fine. I said, hey, Matt, this is what happened. Never been in this situation before. What do I do? He's like, listen, you're just going to have to go find him and ask him to do it again. You can't do the reporter package of Fran Dunphy being inducted into to the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame without interviewing Fran Dunphy, obviously. So at one point he's walking back and I'm like, hey coach, like I'm so sorry. We had a problem with our video. Like, is it okay if I, interviewed again? Like this is really embarrassing. He's like, no, 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 no problem. And he gave me the time and he did it again. And then later that night got inducted to the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame to a standing ovation, might I add, and was the last one I think to speak that night because you save your best for last. And that's what Fran Dunphy was. He was the best, is the best. And the game is going to be worse off without him on the sideline. He'll still have some capacity in the Salle athletic department, but Cope, he was just not only a phenomenal coach and a legend in his own right on the floor, but off the floor too. There was no better person from all accounts. So that's my words on him. I'd like to hear what your thoughts too, because I know you had some interactions with him as well of the last few years of us doing this podcast, but also just your thoughts on him as a basketball coach and as a person.
Yeah, I'll get into an experience I had very, very quickly, and I've only had really two that were not press conferences. One was we got a couple quotes from him at the Big Five Hall of Fame, which he was nice enough to do
Yep.
on his way out. He was some of the last people there. He was able to give us some time. And then I went to a practice at LaSalle this year. Mike Doyle and the staff was nice enough to have me there at PCOM before Glazier Arena was finished. So I went to PCOM, I believe it was on a Saturday morning. I met Nick Lawrence in that day. And before practice started, he came up to me. He said, hello. He shook my hand. He said, hey, I heard you got a podcast talking about what we do. It was very, very brief because there was some other people there. He had a recruit there and the recruit's parents. So very nice enough for him to not only take the time to say hello to me beforehand, but then after practice, he made sure that all the players went up to the recruit and his parents. He had Ken Dempsey, the former coach at UNH, who was there as well. And any other guests who were there for practice that day, he made sure that everybody went around, introduced themselves, and shook their hand. And then I said thank you to him after. We had a nice little chat after. But just a nice guy all around. It was look, Kyle, we do this podcast as a hobby right now. I hope it can be my full-time job one day, not just as I hope I can cover hoops as a career. But right now, this is a hobby for me. I'm nobody. And he was still nice enough to make sure that everybody came over, said hello to everybody that was sitting on the side that day. So very much appreciate that. That was very kind of him to do that. He certainly did not have to, but it was a very kind gesture for him to do that. And then more importantly, way more importantly, his legacy, his career, a dominant reign of basically terror in the Ivy League. A dominant run in the Ivy League. Went on a 48-game winning streak. Penn was a perennial tournament team, a perennial Ivy League representative in the NCAA tournament. Goes to Temple. And Kyle, how often do you see in sports somebody who follows the guy, somebody who has big shoes to fill? Hardly, I think, in sports do you see somebody do that. Do you see a second act that can follow, who came before you? And Fran Dunphy potentially had the biggest shoes of anybody to fill in the history of the Big Five with John Chaney leaving Temple. And it's almost like he did it seamlessly. He was terrific at Penn. He was terrific at Temple. And then I think, Kyle, what's most indicative of his legacy is his tenure at LaSalle. Because sure, like they don't have maybe they don't have a tournament appearance or all these wins, but the fact that he was retired and he came out of retirement as an act of service to his alma mater in a place that had given so much to him. They've outperformed expectations when he's been there. Everybody kills him the 3 years they've been there that they won't be anything. The last 2 years, he certainly surpassed expectations, getting quite a few guys to stay there as well, retaining a lot of the guys that could have left with the coaching transition. And of course, getting the arena renovation done in a matter of a couple years he was there. That got finished. That had been talked about for a decade plus at LaSalle, was to get Tom Goal Arena renovated and as renovated as best they could to be up to standard for the Atlantic 10 with what they had. He got that done. He's leaving his alma mater in a better place. That is to be commended a ton. That is to be saluted for. It was not to diminish the LaSalle job at all, but he did this as an act of service for his alma mater. And now that he's going to stay on and be a special assistant to the president and stay on and be somebody who's going to be an ambassador at LaSalle, as I mentioned this on Spaces last night, be an ambassador for LaSalle, for the university, but be somebody who's going to engage alumni and get alumni excited and invested in the basketball program that they are going to need with revenue share and NIL right now. So he's been a great ambassador for LaSalle, for the Big Five, for basketball as a whole, and he will continue to be even if he's not standing on the sideline. As good as there was, as big as he's made an impact as big as anybody has. Only guy to coach at multiple Big Five schools. He's got 600 wins. He's got the most wins in the history of the Big Five. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody that's made an impact quite like Fran Dunphy has. And that will continue to happen even as his coaching days start to wind down here.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know where this would happen, probably at the Palestra if I had to guess, but that man's deserving of a statue, if we're being completely honest. And I know that he would probably be extremely humble, but also not think he's worthy of it. But he's 100% worthy of it.
Might be
Uh,
worthy of a statue at three different schools, though.
yeah, I mean, obviously, you talk about the contributions to his alma mater. He played there, coached there, everything he's done the last few years. But at Temple, he was extremely successful. And obviously, the reign of terror you mentioned at Penn, where he got his head coaching career started. I mean, yeah. And so, if there's one place to put it, it'd probably be at the Palestra or outside the Palestra or wherever, because obviously, the Palestra, I think, as a whole represents the Big Five, but also his most successful time was at Penn on the court. So, yeah, there's just hopefully that can happen someday, but that's how worthy he is and how recognized he should be for his contributions to college basketball in the city of Philadelphia. And that's that, Cope. Happy trails, Fran Dunphy. You deserve this. Go enjoy, not screaming your head off on the sideline and having to prep and wake up early for practice and all that. I'm sure he'll miss it, of course, but uh, hopefully you can enjoy, retirement from coaching in that sense. All right, Cope. As for the current present day of the Big Five, let's get into a little bit. We've got some stock up, stock down to go over this week. It's not all bad. It's actually a lot of good this week. So we're going to go over that now. I'm going to start with you. Give me a stock up for this past week.
So I'm going to go with one with two guys actually from the same team. I was at the Wells Fargo Center Friday night. Villanova welcomed in number 16 Marquette to South Philadelphia. And Kyle, quite frankly, this was a thrashing really from start to finish. Marquette did not have a lead in this game. Nationally ranked Marquette did not have a lead in this game. Villanova from the jump just threw right hook after right hook. It felt like 12 of 15 from the 3-point line in the first half of this game. I was trying in the archives on Nova's website to find out what was their record for made threes in a half. I found full game. I couldn't find half. Now, they made 13 threes in the first half in the 2018 Final Four when they just curb stomped Kansas en route to 18 threes, which was a Final Four record. I believe a tournament record, too. But they only made 3 threes in the second half, but it was such a fast start by these guys that was highlighted by the two guys I'm going to get to. Number one, Jameer Brickus. Our last episode, I said, as great of a facilitator as he is, he's got to be aggressive in finding his shot. He certainly was in this game, finishes with 21 points. All 5 of his made threes came in the first half. He had a nasty step back on his 5th one right before the halftime buzzer. And then also, Kyle, how about Jordan Dumont? I don't think we've said this guy's name maybe at all. And he's finally been healthy. He sat out his first year at Villanova, did not play. Then he had double hip surgery this past offseason. And Kyle Neptune just said, hey, he's worked and worked and worked. He's back. He's ready. 4 for 4 from the 3-point line, Kyle. You might as well give him 5 threes after he was fouled and he made all 3 free throws. 15 bench points from Jordan Dumont. I don't think anybody expected that to happen and expected Villanova to beat a nationally ranked opponent by double digits when Tyler Perkins was not the guy off the bench giving him the scoring boost. But you see a player like this seldom plays. Double hip surgery, Kyle. Double hip surgery months ago. And this guy's back playing at this level. He's got size, can rebound. He's got the 3-point stroke that's massive when you can put another guy who can space the floor like that out there when one of the starters needs to come out. So really happy for Jordan Dumont when you see a guy like this take advantage of an opportunity, but also for Jameer Brickus. I asked him post game about him being more aggressive scoring, and he's like, hey, like it opens everything up for us. Obviously, I want to pass. I'm a pass first guy, but my scoring is going to open things up for us. We'll be a better team for it. So a terrific win for Villanova. They've now beat 4 ranked teams at home, or 4 ranked teams as the designated home team because they beat Marquette here at the Wells Fargo Center, but dominated another good team. They have wins over number 14. So now Cincinnati's fallen off quite a bit, but they beat Cincinnati. They beat UConn and St. John's when they were both ranked number 9. They now have this win over Marquette. And you just scratch your head and say, well, what happened to some of these other games? You know, like what happened that they lost to Georgetown when they blow that lead in the waning minutes? And what could have been, where would this team be at? It's frustrating. We said that word probably 100 times on Spaces last night, but it's a really good win for them. Jolin already has him in the next four out now, and it's like I said yesterday, it's like Silvio Dante. Just when they thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Here, Villanova, we think they're done. They score a big win like this, and it's like, hey, they're at least in position to give themselves a chance again. We'll see what happens, but it was a really good win for Villanova. The story of the game was they had 15 made threes. And who was responsible for that? Jameer Brickish, Jordan Dumont, those two guys combined for nine of them. Big game for those two guys who in the scoring department we haven't said much lately.
Yeah, and it was beautiful to see. And Cope, gotta give you credit. You called it. You called it out. You said, "Hey, Jameer Bricks should score more." Look what happened. Obviously, Jordan Dumont, taking on that role and scoring his bulk of his points was incredible. As you mentioned, you'd think if someone off the bench is going to give you double figures, it was going to be Tyler Perkins. But it's nice to have someone else step up. It's another good option for already a really good Villanova offense. So if they can continue to have this option off the bench, who knows? Who knows? But yeah, obviously frustrating is the right word for the Wildcats here. But you know what? They're 1-0 in their last one. Keep that momentum going. You never know what can happen. I don't know how they've crept back in a tiny bit, even the most sliverous bit to the bubble, but they're not 100% dead yet. It might be at like 98.7, but they're not dead yet, which is wild. Cope, my who's hot, stock up, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna go with St. Joe's. St. Joe's had a pretty good week, Cope, beating George Washington 79-68 on the road, coming home beating Richmond by 16, 78-62. Now, those aren't two of the greatest teams in the A10, but two good wins, especially at George Washington. It's not an easy place to play. Um, they took care of business. That's all we can ask for. We knew the schedule was going to get a little lighter. It's still, pretty light too. You got Bonaventure, and we'll go over this too when we go over the schedule, but Bonaventure on Wednesday at home, at Fordham on Saturday, home against Rhode Island next Wednesday, and then at LaSalle, which is obviously not far. Uh, Saturday, March 8th. So favorable games they can win, games they probably should win. They're favored to win all of those games in Kent Palm right now. They might finish the season Cope 21-10, 20-11 if they lose one. They might finish 12-6 or 11-7 in the conference, which we knew was a possibility even when they were sitting there at 6-6 after losing that George Mason game. But you got to beat who's on your schedule. That's the bottom line. That's what separates good teams from mid teams and great teams from good teams even too sometimes. So they are still right there for a chance in the A10 for a top four seed, double bye. Right now, they're currently sitting at fourth at 8-6. They're one game behind Loyola Chicago. They're not going to get probably above third because the other two teams are at 12-2, VCU and George Mason. They would need to win 3 out of 4. They would need to win all their games. They need VCU and George Mason to lose 3 out of 4 at least. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Those are two really good teams. But if they at least can stay above Dayton and St. Louis and then even past Loyola Chicago, which is very possible, yeah, they're looking at a double bye cope and would be huge for them. Last year they were the 8 seed and they did not get this opportunity. They had to beat I forget who they beat in the 8-9 game, but
They beat George Mason 8-9, and they beat Richmond, who's one.
yes, they beat Richmond as the one, and then obviously they were in the semifinals, which was great. Historic tournament in the A10 tournament last year where all the top four seeds lost in the quarterfinals. But listen, this team is capable of this. We talk about it, I think, almost every week. But this team is capable of doing damage. They have the talent. They just have to be consistent. But this run of games where they're facing what should be inferior opponents and what has proven to be inferior opponents, at least in terms of record and rankings and all that stuff, this is the time to prove it. This is the time that you can build some consistency. They've started off strong in these first two games. They're hot for me right now. They're a stock up for me. Hopefully they can keep it going against St. Bonaventure on Wednesday. But that'll be their toughest test the rest of the season, I think. That's a really good team. But they're at home. They don't have to go up to Olean. So stock up for me is definitely St. Joe's. Stock down for me, Cope. I'm going to let you talk about the Ivy League because I feel like I talk too negatively about Penn sometimes, unfortunately. But I'm going to go with Temple. I'm going to go Temple as stock down right now. Listen, Cope, they they have been rough as of late. They're now sitting at 500 on the year, 14 and 14. They have lost 6 games in a row. Most of those games have been close. The only one that was not was at UAB on Sunday, which really good team, tough place to play. I wasn't necessarily expecting them to win that one, but they've had games, and we've gone over some of these in the last episode too. They've had games where they've been in it, and I know they haven't had Mashburn for a lot of this stretch too, and that obviously hurts them. And maybe they'd be looking at 4-2 in this 6 game stretch, and not 0-6 or even 3-3. But there's still some games on here that they should have won. For example, at Charlotte on Wednesday, went to overtime with them. They were 2-9 in the conference, I think, going into this game, maybe 2-11, whatever it was, and they lost in overtime. I know it's an away game, and I know it's we talk about it all the time, hard to win on the road in conference play, but that's a game you have the talent to beat without Mashburn, 100%. And you look at the Tulsa game too. That's a team, especially at home, you need to beat. They were the ones who ended the 10-game winning streak to start the season at the Leocore Center. Can't happen. If it would have happened against Memphis or UAB or FAU, like in their next game where they lost 83-81, which was a back and forth game, stinks, but okay. Quality team, get it. Not against Tulsa. Tulsa's not a good team at all. And Temple had played a lot better than this for a lot of the season. And I know, like we said, they're without Mashburn. They've been without Mashburn for a little bit here. I know he played in that Tulsa game, but obviously still banged up, seemingly, and very inefficient in that one. So, it's you can take it or leave it, but it's just disappointing after the strong start to the season they had that they were 14-8, Cope. We were talking about them at the start of this 6 game losing streak, beginning of February, as the most consistent team in the Big Five. And at the time they were. So to see this now, even with the Mashburn injury, it's a little disappointing. So they're going to be my who's not stock down, like I said, whatever you want to call it, of this week. Because, listen, just have to call it like we see it. They have a couple games left to turn this around. Home against South Florida, at Tulsa. Hopefully they can avenge that. And then home against a North Texas team that's pretty good too. So hopefully they can go at least 2-3 in this stretch, finish the regular season above 500. But they have to win all 3 now to get to a 500 conference record, which is not something I thought that we'd be talking about at the end of February. So Temple, unfortunately, stock down right now. But Cope, how about you?
I want to piggyback off Tempo. I want to go to one more winner, and then I'll get to my loser. I'll try to make this as curt as possible. Yeah, as far as Temple goes, I didn't expect them to win this UAB game at all, especially you see Quante Berry miss this game as well. And you think about injuries and just players missing games. Coming into the season, I said, hey, you look at the guard depth that Temple has. How many other teams in the conference have this? And they were without what they thought would be their top 4 guards, including their 3 prize transfers or their biggest gets in the transfer portal. Mashburn has not been healthy. He misses 5 of the 6. And honestly, it's no wonder Temple, without the 3rd leading scorer in America, has lost this many games without him. But Quante Berry, so you have the leading scorer on the team. Quante Berry, the most improved player on the team. He was out of Sunday's game. Jameel Brown's only played 8 games this year, and in the games that he played, he definitely left the fans wanting more. I was so excited for him to be there. A guy that Fisher had recruited. He grew up right around the corner from Temple. A floor spacer, a shooter for Mashburn, and then Lynn Greer, who's only played 5 games due to a pair of suspensions. So they're down their top 4 guys. And Zion Stanford had 17 Sunday, but it took him 20 shots to get there because you look at okay, well, who's going to score for us? Who can create at a high level and try and pick up for all that offense that's out of this game? It's like they're just so banged up and so thin at the guard position with 4 you'd figure rotation pieces out. And it definitely caught up to them, not to mention UAB. The size, the athleticism, it was a thing last year, it was a thing now this year. Yaxel Lendeborg is going to be playing in the Power Fives next year. Somebody's offering him a lot of money. I know for a fact. He's going to be playing somewhere and getting paid a lot. He has 19 double-doubles, Kyle. He's second in America. He almost had a triple-double. A triple-double on Sunday. And what does UAB do? They crash the glass offensively as well as anybody. 21 offensive rebounds, won the rebounding battle 47-31. Just a really tough match for Temple, who's not a great defensive rebounding team, and it's been an issue for him all year. So they beat him up on that front, certainly. I'll touch on a winner real quick, Kyle, because I did want to touch on somebody else. I've been a bit critical of Drexel. How do they win close games? They were 1-4 in games decided by 5 points or less. Hey, 2-0 weekend for them. That included, you were there Thursday, a sweep of their rival, the Delaware Blue Hens. They now lead that all-time series, Kyle, 66-65. That was the 131st all-time meeting between those
About
two.
it.
So how about that? They pull ahead by one game as excuse me, not Drexel. Delaware departs the CAA for Conference USA, plays in probably the wildest geographic conference in America. Well, I shouldn't say that because you Stanford and California are a part of the Atlantic Coast
Also, the
Conference.
American too is a pretty wild geographic conference.
Bunch of wonky ones, but
Yeah.
Delaware Conference USA. Let's lay it out. Up here is Delaware. Down here is Florida International. And way over here, two arm lengths away is New Mexico State. They're going to play in a wicked conference next year. Football team is transitioning up to single A, which is why there's the move. Hopefully, this game is still being played. Budget, rivalry, regional, everything about Delaware Drexel. Like this should be a non-conference game every year. Just flip flop where it's at.
Yep.
Scheduling is hard enough. This should be a
Make it
layup for
easy.
both teams. Make it a little easy. This should be a layup for both teams. Money wise, all you got to do is take a bus trip. It's not even 50 miles from the DAC to Delaware's campus. So I digress. Good 2-0 weekend for Drexel. Also included a win over Charleston, who's now lost a pair of straight meetings coming to the DAC. And it was a win that the score was not indicative of how well Drexel played in this game. So big win over Charleston, over Delaware. And how about this, Kyle? John Camden's one of the premier scorers in the CAA. He was 5 of 13, 3 of 10 from the 3-point line when you were there. And when I was there, when they came to the deck for Drexel's homecoming, 2 of 11, 1 of 6 from 3. They've had this guy in a steel cage when they played him twice. So credit to them. Shane Blakeney, awesome again. And when Drexel, like they will take away they'll make life hell for your best score. I'll put it that way. There's some games they're completely taking out the number one option in the other team. So big kudos to them on a 2-0 weekend. I'll get to a stock down here, Kyle, and it's got to be the Penn Quakers. We're going to go right across Market Street here. The season was over. A heartbreaking loss to Harvard. It was bad in the first half. Offense, just the shots weren't falling. They're down 15, 16 points, blink of an eye. I think it was 21-4 at one point. With 8 minutes off the clock, 8 minutes and change off the clock. A 43-point second half got the game to overtime. The problem was this. I saw one of the craziest plays I've ever seen to end this game. Penn, Ethan Roberts, and George Smith go to the line, consecutive possessions for a 1-on-1 for Penn. With 11 seconds left, they had two chances to really put the game away at the free throw line. Both of them missed the front end. Harvard throws a baseball pass 3/4 of the court. Sam Brown on an outstretched hand. It deflects off his hand, bounces on the floor. Evan Nelson for Harvard grabs it, 2-dribble, pull up from the right wing and nailed it. It was a total broken play. One that you have, I mean, those Penn guys probably haven't slept in days over that one because they should have put that game away, kept their hopes alive for at least another day, and swept Harvard on the year. Had a 2-0 weekend after a nice win against Dartmouth on Friday night. But unfortunately, mistakes cost them. Chances to put away the game cost them, and now the season's over, Kyle. And I hate to be all doom and gloom here, but Alana Wren, who's the AD at Penn, there's potentially some hard conversations and a decision to make here. Does Steve Donahue get a 10th year? They've now missed the Ivy League tournament the last 2 seasons. He has one NCAA appearance in 9 seasons that he's been there. And if that's the case, Steve Donahue leaves. And also, as I mentioned, look, anything can happen in the transfer portal now. But Nick Spinoso, who's been a mainstay in the program, he's graduating. George Smith's been a nice veteran guy off the bench, start when you need him to. He's graduating. We're looking at potentially an unrecognizable Penn program from this year to next year. There could be a change in leadership, but with the season ending, Kyle, all eyes kind of focus on that. I know they have a couple games remaining, but there is no chance for a postseason now for the Quakers, and potentially, Kyle, we could be looking at some big time changes for the men's basketball program at Penn.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about it last week, at least in general for the Big Five, and we've talked about it on Spaces before too. But this is the unfortunate downside of sports and coaching and whatnot. The results aren't there. Sometimes these conversations had to be had, and it's a tough one for sure because I think Steve Donahue a really good basketball coach. But as we talked about on Spaces on Sunday night too, like it just might be time for a new voice. Might be time for a different direction, and that's the reality of it. And we don't want anyone to lose their jobs and have to pack up, go somewhere else, of course. But that's the reality of the situation. So yeah, Cope, we're in for a very interesting offseason. That's for sure. But for now, we're going to focus on the rest of the games of the next few weeks, and including this week, Cope, which an exciting thing on Saturday because the calendar turns to March. So before that, we have a few games in the middle of the week here. Nothing on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the 26th, you, I think, will be at LaSalle against Duquesne at Glacier. And then I think I will be at St. Joe's St. Bonaventure at Hagen. And then Temple's also taking on USF at the Leocore Center. And then traveling up to Newark, short bus ride there. Villanova going to Seton Hall to take on the Pirates there. Thursday, Drexel hosting Hampton at the DAC. Friday, Penn traveling to Cornell to take on Cornell there in Ithaca. On Saturday, LaSalle going down to DC to take on GW. And, of course, Penn going to Columbia, to New York City to take on Columbia there. And St. Joe's also in the afternoon. That was the night slate. The afternoon slate, St. Joe's also going to be in New York City, going to Fordham. Villanova will be home against Butler, and that one is at the Finn, not at the Wells Fargo, for those wondering. And Drexel will be hosting Monmouth at the DAC there as well. And that is a hell of a first slate of March there for the Big Five. Five of the six teams in action. The only one that is not is Temple, and that is because, well, they're not playing Sunday either. But yeah, so Cope, we're about to be in March. How freaking cool is that?
Hmm.
How freaking cool is that?
Two games we're going to look at here.
Yes.
Selfishly, I think I'm going to be at St. Joe's Wednesday because
Okay.
Eric Reynolds is 28 points away from surpassing Jameer Nelson's all-time scoring record of 2,094 points at St. Joseph's. And you look at how well Eric Reynolds is playing. His first ever game was 7 made threes, Kyle, Saturday against Richmond. He's playing very well right now. He went through a slump earlier this season. His numbers were not characteristic of the type of player that we know he can be. And St. Joe's was dropping some games because of it. But he's played outstanding. I think there's some real momentum with this team. Rasheer Fleming, by the way, the week that he had last week in front of a bunch of NBA scouts, Brad Stevens, Nick Collison, Masai Ujiri, all at Hagen Arena Saturday to see this guy absolutely ball out, knock down threes, score, in the paint. He was spectacular last week and especially on Saturday. But St. Joe's, I have my eye on because I'm going to be there Wednesday and hopefully with, potential for 3 games in a row here. Continue to move towards a double bye spot in the A-10. Eric Reynolds has been playing very well. I think there's some real momentum and some energy here that although it's going to take a big effort to get 28 points, I think there's a shot he could do it. And then also, Kyle, I'm going to be at Villanova Saturday. They're playing Butler. It's going to be Eric Dixon's last game playing at Finneran Pavilion. 2 things. Number one, for an all-time player at Villanova, I'm very much looking forward to the reception that he has pre and post game. Hopefully it's a big win for him. They can not only give him a standing ovation as his name is called in the starting lineup one last time, but for a guy that's, might be the last iteration of a Villanova player. Redshirt, develop, get better, add to your game every single season to the point where you're one of the most dominant, or not only one of the most, but maybe the most dominant player in the sport. This might be the last version of that we see. So hopefully he gets a proper send-off. Hopefully they're winning and by quite a few that he can get a curtain call at the end. But looking forward to being there Saturday for an all-time Villanova player. And then how about you want to hear a quick little tidbit?
Love to.
March 1st, 2021, was the first game that I was ever credentialed to cover a game for. I was freelancing for BPA Hoops, who was nice enough to let me freelance scout for them, learn the ins and outs of it, just learn about what it is and how to continue to do that. They were nice enough to get me into Villanova Providence. That had a bunch of guys that are on two-way contracts. Justin Minaya is in the NBA. I know Brandon Slater's working his way in the G League to try and get up to the NBA. Jermaine Samuels was there. But March 1st, 2021, 2 seats down from me was Tommy Godin, who's now become a friend of the show and a
That's
really good
right.
friend to us. And also Kyle, that day, March 1st, 2021, or excuse me, 2022, that was Jay Wright's last home game at Finneran Pavilion, and nobody knew it yet.
Nobody knew it.
And it was a electric game. I think it was Nova who was ranked, was it number 9? And I think Providence was ranked number 11 or number 12, but it was a great game. I remember in the final minute and a half, shorthanded Providence, who I think were they playing without Nate Watson, I think, that day? And I think it was Noah Horkler that got the start, who, of course, knocked down a couple threes, but it was a close game. And I remember Nova having to make one defensive stand. It's the first day of March, kicking off the best month of the year. It's a Saturday. It's a Big East game. Two of the best teams in the conference. One made the Sweet 16, one made the Final Four. Seeing the crowd get on their feet and the place be deafening loud was awesome. Was awesome. Will be something I don't forget. But I thought that was a cool little tidbit. Hopefully, I see Tommy Saturday and I get to say that to him. But the best month of the year is upon us, Kyle, and I'm looking forward to being at Villanova once again to watch the premier basketball tradition conference in the country on the first day of March.
That's right. That's right. Cope, was that the year that Providence was just the most fraudulent team in America?
Well, listen, I know you're like, oh, the Ken Palm luck ratings, yada yada. It was look, if
They
we're
were good, but
let's be real, let's be fair, let's be objective. It was a veteran team, and at the end of the day, they were the ones making the plays in crunch time, and
yeah,
and and I think you just have to be like, hey, they made the Sweet 16. They were one of Providence's best teams in recent memory. Maybe they were just really good.
they were good.
At the time, I was agreeing with you and saying they're a luck box. They have a horseshoe up to you know what. But I have grown. Maybe that team was just really good. I
That's
believe
fair.
really they were.
That's fair. Hey, listen, I love the growth out of you. I love the growth out of you.
That was then, and this is now.
That was then, this is now. Maybe I'm still saying the same, but there's definitely they made the Sweet 16. It's they put some of that to bed in that year. But going at that time of that game, I remember that was the
Not to
conversation.
mention, they gave Kansas a close game, who ended up cutting the nets down that year.
They did. They did. Yeah, which yeah, that was a hell of a year, Cope. But yeah, anyway, I think that's pretty much all we have for this silly little show. Cope, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
We're almost there, man.
Almost
It is
there.
almost March.
Almost March. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to this version of the Big Five Pod. Of course, if you want to check out more from us, you can go to our YouTube, see past episodes, and this episode, which I'm sure if you're watching, you're already there. You can also check out our audio-only versions on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And of course, you can check us out on social media at Big Five Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Be on the lookout for the live Spacious show on Sunday with Aaron Bracey, live from South House, Philly. And make sure you be on the lookout for the announcement for our second annual Brackets Eve live show where we go over all things about the bracket. We'll have some guests to be determined, but we will have some guests and we're going to have a fun time there. So, ladies and gentlemen, until March, see you then.